So what I wanted to talk to you guys about was just I was thinking through this. What does it mean when we say managing priorities well? And I was going to talk through a bunch of different points today. Is what does that mean to manage priorities well? And I want us to just I'll hit on a point, I'll unpack it, and then we'll just kind of talk about it. Sure. So the first one is, managing priorities well means personal ownership. So think about that for a minute, and commitment towards growth. Okay. So when the market shifted, I remember when this happened, and I continued to almost operate in a delusion a little bit. I was just kind of like, okay, and this was way back when you guys weren't around. And I bought my partner out, and I was just sort of continuing to do the same things, continuing to spend the same way, continue to take on debt, continuing to almost be delusional. I didn't think it at the time, but I was just operating, and so my priorities didn't shift. I mean, I just kept doing the same thing over and over, hoping that I was going to get a different result. And I wasn't really committed because I wouldn't own it. I couldn't be committed to growing in it, right? I was still just trying to operate in a world that didn't exist. Yeah. And so to manage priorities well, you do have to just keep, taking personal ownership of like, oh, okay, this isn't working and I need to own it. And then committing to grow. So that's the first part of managing priorities well, is you have to have personal ownership. Yeah. Whole thing. And then out of that, then you say, I'm committed to grow. Because you could still have personal ownership and say, yeah, but you could still not be committed to grow. Does that make sense? You could still say, no, I definitely have an issue. And I've done that in my own life. I've been like, yeah, I know that's an issue. Yeah. But I really wasn't committed to grow out of it. If that makes sense. Yeah. So I just want to hear from you guys.
Yeah, I think we have to also sometimes like take a step back and think about the reality of things. Like, okay, so here's where we were, but here's where things are going.
Yeah.
And how do we adjust and adapt to that? Because I think being flexible is one thing, but also being adaptable is another. So how do we adapt to the reality of where the market is?
Yes.
And I think we do a good job here where, like there's groups that are struggling a ton right now.
Yeah.
But we don't seem to be struggling by any means. Like
Yeah.
we're still chugging along. We're finding new ways to innovate and be creative. Where I think the order takers are just going to kind of fall in the back end, and they'll probably just honestly go away. Where we're going to be chugging forward. So I think at a time right now, we're showing our relevance more than ever, and so it's huge. It's a good opportunity.
It's awesome.
I think part of it's like hindsight's 2020, and it's easy to kind of beat yourself up over it and say, oh, I should have pivoted and changed, on something sooner. But until you've experienced it, especially like, referencing back to like 08 and whatnot, like, man, I made mistakes back then. I was like, like I remember I had a house that I had to sell, and I was talking to the realtor. I'm like, you mean house prices are going down? Phooey. Things like that, where it's like for first rodeo, you just don't know what to expect or how it's coming, and sometimes some of that stuff is like completely and then the next one, like this cycle we're in now is nowhere near as bad as what it was before. So how do you plan for it until it's over, really, or until you know how bad it's going to be? So I think, that being said, it's it's one of those things where, when you do recognize that there's something coming, to overreact is almost better, and take a step back bigger, than you possibly think you should, can be better.
Yeah.
Instead of, when you see a problem coming and you don't know how big that problem is until it's over, and not just financially, but like whatever it is, until that problem's over, you don't know how big that is. So to try and correct course through or in the middle of the problem, or as you get deeper into it, it's not the best approach for sure.
Yeah, it's true. It's a really good point. It leads me to my second point, which is defining reality. So again, managing priorities means, You know, and you say, well, what's managing? Well, we've already defined managing priorities, right? We know what that is. But doing it well means defining reality and then wrestling for clarity. Okay, so think about that for a minute. So defining reality and then wrestling for clarity. Okay, so here, let me give you an example. We have gone through probably 35 different iterations of the model for the new house. We've literally gone through, and we're still going through another round right now that we're just finishing off, because we've continued to run into something and we're like, hey, that's not reality. So, you know, this is a problem. So like we would just, as soon as it comes up, we're like, that's a problem, right? That's, you know, because it's like, that's going to cause a problem for the investor. It's going to cause a problem for our deals. And so then what do we do out of that? We wrestle around for clarity. What do we need to do? How do we need to make an adjustment? What do we need to do to get to a place where we're clear? Because things are fuzzy right now. It seems like we're not clear about what we're doing. And so, you know, if you look where we've come from and look at the gain, it's tremendous. I mean, like if I pulled up your financial model, you guys go, holy crap. Like that's really robust. And it really actually mimics a whole portfolio of if we had 13 loans, right? But we're still defining reality and we're still wrestling for clarity because we're just committed to managing our priorities well. Like we just have to keep doing that. So love to hear what you guys think about this idea of defining reality and then wrestling for clarity. Those two. Why is that important for managing priority well, you think?
I think, if you don't know what you're managing, you can't manage it. I think that's, that's going to be key to it. But I know, especially with what you've got going on, I know it's a lot of it's about like pulling on other people. And at what point do you say you've defined it though? And at what point do you say that you've got enough clarity? I think that can sometimes be a hard point too, because you get into that analysis paralysis. And definitely, I think that's where our in a way our 70% and go comes into play in some scenarios where it can be applied, obviously. But I think it's definitely it's a process that has to be done. How far do you the question is how far do you take it and what situations, and then who do you include in that too? Because you can't. The only way you can, if you're wrestling for clarity, you're only going to get clarity on what you know and what you see. So you cannot do that alone.
100%. And defining reality is a precursor to getting clarity. And because you're saying, well, what is the actual situation now, today, at this moment that we're in, and then what do we need to do to get clear about where it is that we're going to go? But I can't get clear if I don't accept what's really going on today.
It's almost like even with our loan associates we're hiring, the reality is you will be successful if you follow this process and procedure. That's the clarity. But that clarity, we're always trying to figure out how much more clear can we make it so they are successful. So there's a lot of different variables that will be in place.
100%. I think about how many times we've had to keep defining reality when we've been recruiting. We're not making traction. That is a reality. So what do we need to do to wrestle for clarity? Well, we need to make adjustments for this way so that we can keep going forward, and we'll keep iterating, right? It's like, okay, we're making more traction, but do we need to keep tweaking? And so to manage priorities well, you have to keep defining what is the reality and how do I need to get to clarity so that I can really move forward and have peace of mind. All right. So the third one is managing priorities well means working is better together for help. Okay. And so you can go further in the long run. So working is better together for help. So working, this better together concept that we have, so you can go further in the long run. Okay. Have you guys heard of Craig Jelinek? So he's the CEO of Costco. Okay. And Craig is probably one of the, most beloved CEOs, because he's very much focused on this idea of his team is the most important thing. If you look at him relative to a lot of the other CEOs, and a lot of people are starting to shift, is they were very focused on the shareholder value or the shareholder results.
Yeah.
And Craig rejected that, like, very overtly. He's like, no, we're not going to focus on shareholder value. He said, I'm focused on the employees, making sure that they're taken care of, and making sure that we're building the culture that we're trying to do. And if you look at his stock price relative to people like GE, even though GE went like this and then went up, it dropped dramatically. And then he just kept going like this and this and this and this and this, right? Over the long run. It wasn't a short-term fix, it was a long run. And so when 2008 and 2009 came, he actually, he was the last to lay people off, and he was the first to raise people's wages, right? So he was committed to this idea of working better together and working as a team, because it was a long run, not a short run, the decision, but he was managing, that was a priority for him. And he managed it well. And the end result of Costco's actually profits were higher in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12.
100%.
Because that was a priority for him. Okay. So that's why for us, that's one of our core convictions, working better together as a team, right? And if we keep thinking that way, then we'll do better. So
so true. And you can see it when you go to Costco, the people there are always really happy. That's like the gold standard of retail.
It is.
I worked at Target, and everyone's like, if you get a job at Costco, that's where you get a job. So it's a good culture for sure.
Yeah. So that's the third thing. The fourth one is yes is yes and no is no. Do you guys know what a paradox is? You guys ever heard of paradox?
Yeah.
So paradox seems to be a contradiction, but it's not. So it's like, if you ever read the Bible, it says that the first will be last and the last will be first. It's like, what? Doesn't make any sense. But he's trying to make the point that he says, the lowly and the humble are actually the ones that we get exalted, not the high and mighty, right? And so the yes is no, no is yes is a paradox, because to manage priorities well, you have to say yes to the right things, which means that you have to say no. And then by saying no to something, you're actually saying yes to the right things. Okay. So every time you say yes to something, you're automatically by default saying no to something else, because we have the confine of time. Does that make sense? So you can't get it back and you can't add to it. It's fixed. And so you automatically say yes to this. So when I said yes to you guys this morning, so we're going to do this, I automatically said no to other things. Okay. And then when I say no to something, what I'm saying is yes to the best. So what do you guys think about that concept? Yes is no.
Makes sense. You can only fill your pot with so much. So if you're putting in stuff that you don't need or want or not good for you, then you're not leaving space for the stuff that is.
Correct.
It's like when you plan your day or your month or your year, if you say yes, it gets pretty overwhelming. I mean, it just run around like crazy. So saying no allows for you to say yes to
the best,
the most impactful things.
Correct.
And I've struggled with this, and I really worked on it, and it's changed a lot for me. Like, I'm no longer running around like crazy. I focus on things I need to focus on, and I'm much more productive because of it. But that wasn't an easy shift.
And these things can be battles, that you have to wrestle with. you know, when I said yes to going up this weekend, what I was saying to my family is, no, I'm not gonna be with you, right? And you kind of go, well, that's bad, and it's like, well, reason why I said yes is because I know that I only have I have less time with my mom than I do with you.
Mhm.
Sense? So I know that she only has a smaller window. So I had to prioritize that because it was important. And by the way, urgent. Does that make sense?
That's right.
Where my family's just as important. It's not like they're less important, but there was less urgency, right? So it's like, okay, yeah. And so my yes meant no, and my no meant yes. Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. So just think about that when you're managing priorities. Well, you're going to do that,
100%.
and you got to be okay with it.
Yeah.
The other one is dying to bad impatience. So managing priorities means you have to die to bad impatience. There's good impatience, and then there's bad impatience, and then living to daily compounding habits. Okay, so I want you to think about this. And Dan, you talked about this a little bit. When we're driven to distraction, think about how many things can distract you in the day. Like it's like it's really overwhelming because we have so many touch points, phones, emails, texts, all those things are vying for our attention all the time. Okay. So you have to, like, to manage priorities, you have to literally die to the bad impatience where you're like, oh, I was on the plane yesterday between two younger guys, and literally, I'm not kidding, the whole time we're just like they just looked anxious, just doing this the whole time, just and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I was getting anxious just being in between, but they were just restless, impatient, and I just wanted to turn to both of them. I didn't, but just be like, dude, just calm down, put the phone down, okay. So we're all susceptible to that. I am susceptible to that. So I have to learn to die to that, right? Lay that down, and then live to the new habits of like that compound the good things that I do, right? And so to manage priorities well, we have to do those things. Okay. Managing priorities well means showing people that they matter to you. Integrity is actually most manifested in your actions, not your words, right? Those matter, but it's actually, because I lay my week out so clear, what I'm saying to you guys is you matter to me. Because I'm like, I need to accomplish these things if I'm actually going to live out what I keep saying to you. I have to do it. Otherwise, I'm a hypocrite, not perfect, but permanent. And so to manage priorities well, what you're saying to your other team members is you matter to me. Because I need to do this to show you that I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do so that as a team, we can be better. Okay. So to do that well, it's manifested in our actions, not necessarily in words. So what do you guys think about that?
I agree.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. If it's actions speak louder than words. Intentions don't do much.
Yeah, exactly. Good. The other one is to manage priorities well, you have to continually be reflective and innovative. So I just liken this to taking a shower. When we stop, we collect dirt all day, right? We just kind of are collecting dirt. And then you take a shower, and how do you feel when you get out of the shower? You're just like, I feel refreshed, I feel clean. And so when we're reflective, means we stopped to look at what happened, and we say, what went well, what did I learn, and then how do I need to change, right? That's part of the innovative process. What happened? It's reality. What do I learn from that? Oh, that was interesting. I could have done that differently, da 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 da. And then what do I need to do to change in the future? That actually takes time to reflect.
Yeah.
So that is white space carved out for you to go, huh, what happened? And that's a good thing if you want to manage your priorities well. I do it every night.
Yeah.
I just jot down, journal, 15 minutes. What happened today?
Yeah.
What did I learn? Where did I fail? What do I need to do to change? Right? That 15 minutes, and I'm not joking, is probably one of the most powerful things that I do as a leader.
Yeah.
Period. Like it is the most impactful thing because I get to unpack what happened and then say, well, that went well, but that didn't. And what do I need to do to change? So what do you guys think about that?
I agree.
Yeah, because if you're not reflecting or looking back, like no matter on anything you do, and if you're not looking back and revisiting it, you're not ever going to improve or see past where and it's funny you say like a shower. I always use, whenever I'm in the shower, I always use that time to just like think about projects or reflect and whatnot. I'm not a writer, so I can't jot things in a notebook. But I always find that because there's zero distractions at that point, you're not gonna have kids bothering you or nothing else. So I think that's it definitely, it's a good time to look back and reflect on things. And it's amazing what comes into your mind when you just
Yeah,
block off everything else, all the distractions, and kind of try to clearly look back on something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You do it the way that works for you, right? Reflection itself has to happen. The question is, how does it work? That's how I do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Go for a walk, maybe take a shower, but it's carved out time. You have white space to slow down and go, what happened?
Yeah.
And it allows you, that's when your creativity happens. It's when your
Mhm.
creative happens, is when you're not in the,
Yeah.
so.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's important to just kind of separate yourself from like last week, I had a ton of distractions and honestly derailed my entire week. And I wasn't able to do anything I wanted to do. But it was a priority at the time. But then when I reflect over it, it was just a lot of time wasted. It consumed me over unnecessarily necessary things.
Right.
So from last week, I learned a lot about how I need to move forward and grow from that, because that can't happen every time. I mean, it just totally throws you off. So that's a good point, where it's like manage the right things, but also how do you manage them when things do go, a different direction than what was planned. So
it's good.
Just kind of interesting. It's very relevant to what happened. So
that's great. Final one is when I manage priorities well, I really care about the client.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting, huh? You wouldn't think about managing priorities as caring for the client. But what you're doing is you're actually intentionally adding value to them. Now, here's the key, even though they won't ever see it.
Yeah.
They'll just experience it.
Yeah.
And so, when you manage your priorities really well, the end user, our client, who's a person, they get the best of you when you do that versus the worst of you. Does that make sense? And that even means, and Dan knows this too, we all know it. A lot of times it means I'm not going to work with you.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I can show the people I care about. I'm not going to work with you. I care about you so much. I know what'll happen if we work together, and it won't be good.
Yeah.
And so we're just not going to part ways. So that I can say no to you, so I can say yes. Right.
Yeah.
You're right person. Right. That's when that yes, no, no, yes comes in. But it is showing the client I care for you, because I'm going to say yes to you, which means I'll say no to the other, right? Because that's always the battle.
Yeah.
Right. It's the old school thing when we always say, what do they do? Trying to remember what they call it. When you're trade-offs, you're always trading off, things all the time, right? If I do this, I can't do that, So with that in mind, what is your one takeaway from this that you would put into motion, you think? Because whenever we learn something, I always say, what one thing do I need to do to put into motion or implement or take to heart. So
I like the idea of like reality and wrestle for clarity.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to also put in perspective, what is reality and how do we get clarity from there?
Yeah.
Because that's not only going to impact us now, it'll impact us later and then continue to impact us down the road.
Yeah.
And also the next thing is just continuing to like focus on yes and no. So yes and no, that's gonna be my big thing. So
yeah,
definitely will take advantage of that opportunity.
good,
So
good. I
I'll
love it.
say no to everything Tom asked me to do. I'll have plenty of time to say yes to everyone else.
Exactly.
Time to start using double negatives for Dan. Get him
Exactly.
to say yes to things. How about you not meet with me?
Exactly. Reverse psychology. Yeah. What about you, Tom?
I think for me, and something I've kind of got teed up for this week and kind of tail end of last week, but can continue to focus on is just kind of, the better together, working with more people and kind of, bringing people in a bit. I think that's one that I need to focus on. And then also the saying no. I was thinking when you were talking about it, I was saying no, or about saying no, I was thinking that can sometimes be, in a way, like not, I guess more so protecting your time in a way of it's something that you need to say yes to, but put it at the appropriate time. So like saying no to like a specific time, or saying no to being flexible on certain things. It's something that needs to get done, but don't, say no to the being flexible part of it. I think that's something I need to work on, because I know I can be overly flexible on things like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, John in our meeting today was like, "Hey, what about this, and I'm like, "No, it was just not a priority right now. I think it's important. It's just not a priority.
Yeah.
If we can
Yeah.
keep kicking the can down the road, that's fine." I said, and you guys will appreciate this. He was like, "Well, delegate it." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that right now. This is my guys. Too much going on, and I'm not going to have another thing." So again, it's just a fight for just no, yes, yes. For sure. So good. Well, I just wanted to go through